Hello, and welcome to our Transition Blueprint. This presentation is going to cover how we become a trauma-informed school. Before we start, I'd like to give everybody so our goals for today, we're going to talk about taking our school from a sort of traditional based program to becoming trauma informed. And so our first goal is to understand what being trauma informed means. Our second goal then is to understand the prevalence and the impact of trauma. And then the third goal is to have a practical understanding of how we are going to become a trauma informed school. So Jim Sporletter, who is, he was the principal of the high school that's featured in Paper Tigers. He and Heather Forbes wrote a book together in 2016, and they say that being trauma informed is all of the ways in which a service system is influenced by having an understanding of trauma and ways in which it is modified to be responsive to the impact of traumatic stress. So in terms of that definition, you can see that we're not speaking specifically of just a school, but any service system. So the healthcare system, our adjudication system, our prison system, all of these things can become trauma informed. Of course, for us, we're just going to talk about the school because, one problem at a time. So, in other words, being trauma informed means that we understand the impact that trauma has on our students and we are responsive to it. So there's been a lot of talk about multi-tiered systems of support, MTSS. And in terms of the entire MTSS system, you can see in this graphic that trauma fits right in, right? So MTSS is all of the things that go in to support our students' growth. So it involves positive behaviors, interventions and support, which we already do at our school. RTI, or response to intervention, which we also have going on both a behavioral side and the academic side. Restorative discipline, which is coming. Social emotional learning, which is also coming. And mental health services, which we are also working on. And all of those things support one another and they support the students. But trauma, in my mind, is the foundation of a strong multi-tiered system. Everything else that we do goes to support students who have suffered trauma and the students who haven't. Honestly, the things that we're going to talk about today benefit everybody in the school. Students, staff, teachers, admin, everyone will benefit from being trauma informed. So the discussion about becoming trauma informed is really based on the adverse childhood experiences study that was done way back in the mid-90s, which the study itself actually went to go look at what are the health outcomes of adults who had traumatic experiences in their childhood, which, of course, as we know, are many. But they developed this adverse childhood experiences listed. Now, you get 1 point for every experience that you've had that's on the list. No one experience is worth more points than others. We don't judge the size of people's trauma, only that it has happened. So here's the list of adverse childhood experiences. As you read it, I'd like you to think about the students that we serve. Think about the students in your classroom. You may not know everything about what has happened or is happening in a child's life, but some of us, we know that our students are experiencing some of the things on the list and maybe more than one, right? Statistically, we know that up to 70% of people have suffered at least one adverse childhood experience. And some people have suffered more than that. But think about these things in reference to your children. How might this have an impact on their development? In addition to the adverse childhood experiences, which, like I said, was developed in the 90s, in 2017, Ellis and Dietz created this graphic, which also adds adverse community environments to the list of things that could impact children in a negative fashion. So there's poverty and discrimination, lack of opportunity, poor housing, violence, all of those things can create an adverse experience for a child. So what happens when trauma comes to school, right? And I really like this graphic. I know it's kind of hardcore, but this is what traumatized children remind me of, right? Because they're children. No matter what age they are, they're children. But they sometimes have those scary teeth that come out, right, when they get triggered. And so I think this is the perfect illustration for that. When a child is growing in a traumatic environment, it alters the way that their brain is structured neurologically. We're not going to go into all of the neuroscience today. That's going to be a different presentation. But cumulatively, over time, right, if there's no intervention, trauma will impact the way a child learns because it impacts all of these things: concentration, memory, organizational abilities, language, and behavior, right? Which ultimately is going to impact academic performance. So when you think in terms of academic success, when we address a child's resiliency or their survival skills, right, we're ultimately going to impact them positively in terms of academic performance. So this is a graphic that I created to help explain what's going on with our tier 3 kids. So I took the RTI triangle and I turned it on its head so that you can see that there's a direct correlation in our toughest students, our tier 3 students. They have a direct correlation between getting their basic human needs met and feeling safe and secure, right? And you can see it in their behavior. And until those needs are met, until they're feeling safe and secure, they cannot develop healthy relationships, right? And without healthy relationships, there is no achievement. So we have to meet those red levels first so that we can get them up into the purple levels. Because without that, we're all going nowhere fast. We have to have relationships. So how are we going to do this? What a good question. It's really a 2-year process. The first year starts by creating a team, right? This team is going to do a lot of planning, a lot of learning, and they are going to lead the way in our next step. Who should be on this team, you might be wondering? Well, here we go. Obviously, our principal needs to be on board, right? We're also going to add our counselor and our behavior specialist, yours truly. We're going to have somebody from the cafeteria, somebody from the bus yard out there. We're going to have our SRO involved, somebody from our custodial staff, a couple of teachers, a couple of paraprofessionals. We're going to try and find some parents to be on board, and we're going to try and find some of our older students. This isn't going to be for every student, and they may not be involved in some of the harder discussions that we're going to have, but we would like to get their input in terms of what things help them feel safe at school. So when you look at this list, you can see that all areas of our school are represented. And we want to do that to create some consistency and some consistency across our whole campus, right? We want students who go into the cafeteria to be treated with trauma in mind. And we want students on the bus to be treated with trauma in mind. And when the school resource officer gets involved in a student situation, we want him to have a trauma lens on. We want everybody in the building to be thinking about what might be going on in a child's brain when they are becoming upset and escalating. So the first part of training that trauma leadership team is going to go through, right? They're going to do an introduction to trauma. This is a full day training that's going to go more in depth into what happens in the brain, when development is interrupted by trauma. They're going to partake in a couple of book studies, right? And they're also going to watch the film Paper Tigers, right, which is about that high school that does trauma-informed practices, so that we can get a good idea of how to bring this to the rest of the school. And this trauma leadership team, they're going to be our trauma experts on campus. These are the people that you can go to when you need help understanding a student, when you need another opinion. These are the people who are going to be able to help you. So we're going to do a couple of book studies. The first one is called Fostering Resilient Learners by Sowers and Hall. This is a really great down-to-earth book that really explains what trauma does in the head and how we can help students in class and also help ourselves. I really, really like this book because it's readable for normal people. It's very approachable, and it doesn't give you suggestions that are never going to work, right? There are solutions in this book that you can start using tomorrow that will have a positive impact, and I think that's really important. The second book we're going to read is called Teaching with Poverty in Mind by Eric Jensen. So we're not addressing poverty per se in our school. That is not the target, but there's a lot of crossover, specifically in behavior, between students who have suffered trauma and students who are living in poverty. Being poor itself doesn't have to mean that you're living in trauma, right? You can come from a really warm home environment that has no money. But living in poverty does create fertile ground from which trauma can rise, right? So very frequently, our students who are living in poverty are also dealing with trauma. And this has some really great strategies on how to address those behaviors, and they're very, very effective across the board. As a team, we're also going to assess the kind of punitive measures that our school has in place. For example, we're currently using in-school suspension and out-of-school suspension plus detention, both after school and at lunch. We can do better. We can re-examine how our consequences for behavior can be more trauma-informed. One of the differences between a trauma-informed school and a traditional school, in a trauma-informed school, we work hard to keep the kids in school. They're here to learn, and particularly if they're having some kind of trauma, sending them home is not necessarily the best answer, right? If a child is living in a chaotic environment at home, and they come to school, which is supposed to be the safe place, and we send them back home because of what they do, not only are we reinforcing the statement or the belief or the philosophy that you can't stay here because you're so bad, we don't want you, right? We're also potentially sending them back to a dangerous situation. So we're going to work on restructuring our consequences so that they are more trauma-informed. The next step in the second year is going to be campus-wide implementation, which is daunting, but not as daunting as it sounds. So this campus-wide training is going to involve everyone who works in the school, from the front office to the gym, to the cafeteria. Everybody who works in this school is going to be involved in the initial training, right? So the theory is right now, the working theory is that we have one general training about trauma, and then we'll have several breakout groups about trauma and more trainings through the year. And those will be tailored for specific audiences. So for example, right, we're going to talk about the introduction to trauma. That's going to be a campus-wide training. Everyone will have that. But there isn't any need really for the cafeteria people to learn about classroom interventions, right? So they won't be expected to go through classroom interventions, right? But they will do some building relationships, because everybody needs some relationships. So some of the trainings will be for everyone, and some will be for targeted groups or more than one target group, right? So we're going to talk about classroom interventions. what we can do to strengthen the way that we respond to behaviors in the classroom. We're going to talk about using calming zones within our classrooms. We're going to learn about how to create calming areas that can help students when they get dysregulated determine and recognize that they're dysregulated and utilize the calming zone to help them come back to baseline. So that'll be a separate training. We're also going to do a training on building healthy relationships and how important they are in the lives of a child. We're also going to do a training about using circles in our classroom. Circles are going to be used to be initially just to build community, right? They're going to be a way for us to create safety in our classrooms and to create tiny communities within our school that will help foster trust. We're also going to do training on our newly created in-school suspension room, which is also going to be our calm room. So currently, when a student gets in-school suspension, the teacher sends a bunch of work and they sit in a room and that's all they do all day, right? In our new improved ISS program, students will still be able to have ISS as a consequence, but rather than just doing busy work all day long, we will staff the ISS room with a teacher who is knowledgeable about trauma, who has a deep understanding about the importance of healthy relationships, so that there can be some processing in the ISS room with a student, some skill building activities that can happen, all within the confines of that relationship. At the same time, that area, because we don't have a lot of spare rooms in our school, that same area will also be a calm room, which is a room that students can come to when the calming zone in the classroom is not enough. So when a student is really, really upset, really dysregulated, the teacher can suggest that they come down to the calm room, or the student themselves can leave class and come to the calm room and help become regulated again. So we're going to work out the specifics of that, and we will have a training. But the students will also be trained in how to use the calm room and what it's for. Throughout the year, our administrative team is going to be doing walkthroughs. Walkthroughs are going to look for ways that we are handling students in the classroom, students who are becoming dysregulated specifically, whether or not they have trauma, right? Because what we're talking about works for everyone. So when we do those walkthroughs, when they do the walkthroughs, because I won't be doing the walkthroughs, when they do those walkthroughs, right, they're going to look at, are you using fidget toys to help the students? Is the calm room available? Is the calming area in the classroom available? Are you using the tools that we're working on? Are you doing community building circles, right? Those are the things that our administrators are going to be looking for when they come through our classrooms. And ultimately, our goal is to transform our school into a safe place for everyone in our community. Not just our students, but for us, for the grown-ups in the building, for visitors to our building, for our parents, for our local community. We want this to be a safe place for everyone. Now, my favorite guy, Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, he says in his book, The Body Keeps the Score, that the greatest gift for traumatized, abused, and neglected children is to receive a good education in schools where they are seen and known. He doesn't say that the greatest gift for traumatized children is $1,000 package curriculum. He doesn't say it's some sort of magic pill. He doesn't say it's a new Xbox 360 or whatever they're playing on right now. He says that the greatest gift is a good education in a school where they are seen and known. And that's what our job is. Our job is to see our students, not just their behavior, but really see them, see past the behavior, see who they really are. So these are the references that I have used in creating this PowerPoint. There's one more. And I appreciate you sticking with me. If you have any questions, feel free to approach me after the break or any time in the future. Thank you very much. And to take care of yourself. We're going to be talking about trauma. We're going to be thinking about trauma. We're going to be discussing trauma. And that's not an easy thing. And so, if at any time you feel overwhelmed or like you just can't be here for this, please feel free to step out, take a break, take care of yourself. If you need to go to lunch early, please do that. If you need to text or call somebody, please do that. If you need to run to Starbucks, please bring something back for me. But in any case, please take care of yourself, okay? Thank you.